So this person says, hi, the source you can find yourself, but Japan, Italy, France, Scandinavian countries all have unprocessed diets and all top 10 for life expectancy. Google is your friend. And guys, I want to point out to start that this is an excellent example of someone who doesn't have a source at all. Do your own research. I don't have to do research to support my claims. You do your own research. Google is your friend. However, let's take a little deeper look at it. Now, the countries he listed, that's not what we're going to look at, because here's the thing. There's a diversity of diets in all of these countries, and they absolutely eat a lot of processed foods, in every single one of them. But I think deep down what he's actually trying to talk about is what's called the blue zones. In the blue zones are certain areas or regions around the world that are known for having extraordinary longer life expectancies than the global averages, even in the developed worlds. And I want you to look at something right here. The United States has one. Yes, Loma Linda is one of the blue zones, which has one of the highest life expectancies in the world, apparently. But we also have one in Costa Rica, Italy, Greece, and Japan, which is one of the ones that he's talking about. And I wanted to look and find out some of the foods that we could find in all of these places. And one of the things I found is there's a McDonald's in almost every single one of them. Here's the Loma Linda McDonald's. Here's a Okinawa, Japan McDonald's. And here is a Sardinia McDonald's. We got a review here of somebody that has visited the McDonald's in Sardinia from the UK. And they love it because unlike McDonald's in the UK, they have a cake counter. Then here is Nicoya, Costa Rica, one of the idyllic Blue Zone paradises, which now has McDonald's, KFC, and a Burger King. But you might be like, oh, you're cherry picking. They don't eat at those fast food joints. Well, one, yes, many of the citizens in those places absolutely do eat at those fast food chains, or they wouldn't be able to support those fast food chains. So if they are living so much longer, they're living so much longer, even with a certain demographic of their population eating fast food. But let's look at some other foods commonly eaten in some of these countries. Starting Italy, we have a ton of processed meats. Like, if you really think Italians aren't eating processed foods, you've never eaten Italian food. You don't know what Italian food is. I mean, processed meats is kind of a staple of Italian food. But I want to point out another staple of both Greek and Italian food and many other cuisines. Olive oil. And yes, olive oil, like all cooking oils, is processed, highly processed in fact, and it's good for you. There's nothing inherently wrong with olive oil as long as you're not like literally guzzling it, because olive oil is high fat. So if you consume too much olive oil, you're going to gain weight. But olive oil on its own, it's a highly processed food, but it's fairly good for you. Japan has its own processed condiment, soy sauce. Soy sauce is also obviously processed, and there's nothing inherently wrong with soy sauce either, but the idea that Japanese food doesn't have processing is just completely false. Even better, Japan has a ton of junk food, and they have a large variety of junk food as well as packaged foods in general, and these are all processed foods, like highly processed foods which rival any of their American equivalents for being processed and actually lacking micronutrients and all that stuff. So yeah, Japan has plenty of junk food, so I don't know. One of the other things I read about many of these blue zones, especially Sardinia, Italy, the Icaria, Greece, and Loma Linda, California, is a lot of them are moderate wine drinkers, and they're saying that drinking some wine reduces heart disease. And with Japan, it probably is other things such as sake and other alcohols, but here's the problem with that. That's not good science. In fact, the idea that moderate alcohol consumption is actually better for you than not drinking alcohol is based on flawed research. And what mistake did they make? Well, very simply, when they were doing the research, they had three categories. They had non-drinkers, moderate drinkers, and heavy drinkers. Now, heavy drinkers obviously had the most health issues, but they found that non-drinkers had more health problems than moderate drinkers. So they assumed that meant a little bit of alcohol consumption is actually good for you. But there's a problem. The non-drinkers category had a lot of former alcoholics, which distorted the results. So, in more modern research, they controlled for this factor and they only used lifetime non-drinkers. What did they find? Lifetime non-drinkers had higher health markers and life expectancy than even moderate drinkers. So that's another thing about this that's untrue. So what is the real reason blue zones have such high life expectancy? So at least according to Nobel Prize winning research, the longevity claims of these blue zones might be down to lousy birth and death record keeping. So if you want to live longer, fudge your birth certificate and your death certificate, and it will show that you lived to 120, which is way longer than anyone else. So that is the secret to longevity, apparently. So read this here. Just go ahead and pause to read it, but they're famous for their supercentenarians, but there's inconsistencies with the birth and death records, particularly in regions like Okinawa, Japan, and parts of Italy and Greece, where a disproportionate number of people have claimed to achieve extreme longevity, so-called blue zones. Go ahead and pause to read again, but I really want to point out this part down here. Carl Sagan has once said, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And what have we found? These blue zones don't have the extraordinary evidence to support your claims. But overall, is it true that the people that live the longest because they have a diet rich in unprocessed natural foods, to where people that eat processed foods just can't live that long? Well, it seems the answer is no. But I also want to point out, it's incredibly bold of you to think that longevity is monofactorial. It's almost definitely multifactorial, with dozens, if not hundreds and thousands of reasons for why people live that long. Is diet part of it? Yes, but it's also clearly not about processed versus unprocessed or natural versus artificial. It's almost definitely more about the actual nutritional content and the quantity that you eat, because people that overeat are going to have lower life expectancies than people that eat properly. People that undereat are probably also going to have lower life expectancies than people that eat properly as well. But we have other things like lifestyle factors, your activity levels. There's probably an optimal climate for human flourishing. Places that are too cold, too hot, places that don't have enough sunlight, places that have too much sunlight. These are not going to be optimal for human health and flourishing either. But we also have things like air quality. I mean, high air quality is very, very important for human health. Low air quality, very, very bad. And then, of course, healthcare. The countries with the best healthcare systems are going to have higher rates of health, longevity, and pretty much every other health marker than countries that do not. So the idea that we can even narrow this down to one or two individual things is an extraordinary claim that requires extraordinary evidence that you refuse to provide. And that simple Google search, thank you for recommending Google, because I've never heard of Google before, but it debunked all of your points. So thank you for that.